Welcome back to The Book Stop. I'm so excited to talk about today's episode. Fair warning moving forward, this podcast does contain spoilers as we go over major events within the novels. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on Apple, Spotify, and Instagram at The Book Stop Podcast. Alright, we're back again. Today we have guest star, Cody, my brother. What did you bring today for us to talk about?
Today we brought Maximum Ride by James Patterson.
Yeah, so James Patterson, a little bit about him. He is a young adult fantasy author. A little fun fact, he holds the record for the #1 New York Times bestseller list by a single author, which is a total of 67, which is also a Genesis World Record, which is pretty cool. So yeah, James Patterson's a pretty well-known author. Like, he definitely, with that title, he definitely earned that Reputation, yeah. I knew it was an R word. So he's definitely earned that reputation of it. This one is called Maximum Ride, The Angel Experiment, and this was published in 2005. So before we get started, I like to play a little game right out the bat.
Oh, shoot.
So you are going to summarize this book in 30 seconds. No twists, just simple and easy.
Okay.
So go ahead and start now.
Well, it's basically a group of kids trying to figure out what their purpose is in their current existing life, finding out why they are who they are, trying to figure out where they came from, how they came to be to what they are today, and why are they so important to what are called the white coats or researchers. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yep. All right, yeah. For the most part, you definitely did a good job just summarizing it. So I'm just going to give a little summary for anybody who hasn't read this book yet. So Maximum Ride, it tells the struggle of 6 kids, aka the flock, who was created in a lab known as the school. 98% human and 2% bird. You kind of missed that part where they are, birds. And focuses on the abduction of the youngest member and the rest of the flock's journey to find and save Angel. While fighting erasers, which are human/wolf hybrid creatures, and the evil scientists of the school. So yeah, I read this story way back when. I was probably like a freshman in high school when I first picked up this series, but I got through like halfway through the second book and then just stopped because I just personally am not a huge fan of James Patterson's writing. He's very good at cliffhangers. Like every chapter ends in a cliffhanger almost, and I applaud that. That's a good job, but me personally, I think his writing's just too fast. Every chapter is like, especially in this book, literally every chapter is like 2 pages long, and which is good because each chapter, is usually a different point of view, and I love stories that have different points of views, and I think that's a great way to tell a story. But just in his writing style, I feel like it's too jumpy and too short.
And that's what I kind of like about it, honestly. Personally, I don't like books that have 10, 20 pages in a chapter. And that's what kind of drew me to this, aside from library that was in my school had the manga series.
Okay, yeah.
And that what kind of drew me to the actual books themselves. And finding out that the books were, a couple pages per chapter, it was like, hey, I can get used to this.
Yeah.
So
I can definitely see the pros of it. Like, if you're the type of person that reads chapter by chapter in a book and you're like, okay, I'll read the next chapter. You can get through like a bunch of chapters and before you have to stop reading. But yeah, I can see where you're coming from for sure. Before we get into it, why don't you give us your favorite quote from the book?
Well, it's more closer to the end of the book. There was a scene where, I'll just go ahead and read it.
Okay.
So we're looking at like page 408 if you're looking from the physical book. Take a right, I shouted at Angel, and she did, swerving gracefully into a large tunnel. Just as I swerved after her, almost crashing into a wall because I banked too late, I heard one last haunting cry. Jeb had changed his tone again. He was screaming at me, and I pictured his red face, red as a stop sign. You killed your own brother.
Yes, that was...
Plot twist.
Yeah, a big plot twist. And yeah, obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, there are going to be spoilers, and that was a big one. So basically, to give a little background, what happened before all this went down for this quote?
They were in New York. They were looking for answers from where they were from. And she ended up getting her flock into what is called the Institute. And they had found some other mutant children who were, well, honestly, experiments. And as they were escaping, they found themselves being tracked by the Erasers, which are the half man, half wolf. Ari, who was chasing after them, they got into a fight and pretty much was like a no holds bar type thing. And next thing you know, they both went down. He somehow snapped his neck as she was basically holding his neck.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of led to where the scenario of where they were still running to get out of the sewers from the Institute. And that's when she had heard that. So.
Yeah. Max is the leader of this flock of 6 kids, I want to say?
6 kids.
6 kids. And, when they were in the Institute, Jeb was one of the scientists that took care of them, and he kidnapped them from the school and took them to this house, like, way out in the woods, and started raising them. And Jeb was kind of a father figure towards these kids, and Max started to see him as her adopted father. And Ari is actually his child, his son that he left behind, and they turned him into this eraser. That's why it's such a significant thing, where it might seem like, he sees her as his daughter, and this is actually his son, and he's trying to take this, like, emotional branch of Max and be like, you killed your own brother, but it's never said in this book, but I think in the future, it's definitely going to be like, that's actually her brother. Like, I think that is actually going to be, like, her father.
And I honestly, and it kind of does make sense with, if you, when you read the book, you kind of see certain circumstances where he doesn't necessarily give off a bad tone towards Max, and the circumstances where he does, meet her and whatnot. So you kind of look at it as, he could very well be, the father figure, let alone he could actually legit be her father, which, like you said, I think it's brought up further on down in later books.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I thought that was pretty much one of the fascinating things about it, because you kind of get this passion for a father from Max, so to speak. Like, she saw him as her father figure.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it kind of just puts all the pieces together at that end.
Yeah, I really like that quote, because it does kind of, it's at the end of the book, so it makes you want to, like, read more, because you're like, oh, so what's going on? And it's also, like, a good draw to, like, a close, too. Like, okay, so this is the end of the chapter, and you're like, okay, I want to know more. So it's a good way to end a book, that's for sure. Yeah, so my favorite quote was, it was more towards the end of the book, too, and it goes, okay, so a little background before I say it. So Max gets this voice in her head, and it's never stated who the voice is yet. In this quote, she's talking to that voice, and it says, "There you go, Max," said the voice. "That's the difference between you and Fang. Don't you dare say anything bad about Fang," I said. "He's usually right, and he's probably right about this." Is it important to be right, or is it important to do what's right? That's one of the hardest lessons to learn. And that's, like, a big thing in this story, is they want to figure out more about their fate, and they want to know, like, about themselves, but at the same time, they have to figure out, is this the right thing to do? A lot of the big thing is Max has to save the world. That's, like, the biggest thing, and is what drives the plot, is them wanting to know about their past, but also, the voice trying to trick her into, like, doing what's right to save the world. And Max, throughout the whole story, has to decide, do I want to do what's going to help my flock and my family, or do I want to do what's going to help the society in itself? And in the first book, we never really see what she has to do to save the world. Like, why is this destiny put on her? We don't see that in this book. I would say they would put it at the end, but they never did. So I think it's a very interesting way to do it, where, we don't see the big climax of the series until later in the stories. We just know now that she is important, and that she has something to do with what's going to happen later on.
To bounce off that close to the end, where they finally are free, they get, they're out of there. They're out of the Institute. She had mentioned about, her flock being her world.
Mm-hmm.
So to her, she's trying to make it to where in her mind, she's saving her world, which is her flock, the family.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're gonna see more of the conflict in the second book when it comes to the difference between what she believes her world to be versus the world itself. But just kind of piggybacking on that and just giving that food thought.
Yeah, for sure. So, to go back to Patterson's writing, I think the first thing that he should have done was to remove the prologue. It's like, I think, 2 pages at most? Mm-hmm. And it honestly spoils so much stuff. And I just think it would have been a better move on his part if he just removed that and left a lot of it for the readers to kind of figure out. Like, he explains pretty much the whole plot. He explains what the erasers are, and then literally the next page he explains it all again. So I think it would have been better if he just removed that whole thing. But that kind of jumps into his writing. Like, I feel like a lot of his writing's a lot of telling instead of showing. Like, he just tells the readers what's happening instead of, like, showing. Well, not all the time, obviously, but a lot of the big main things, it's just easier to be like, for him, it to be like, I'll just explain this in an easier way than to kind of dive into it. Mm-hmm. But maybe he does it more later on. Maybe he just wants to, like, kind of say what he has to say and then figure out more on the plot. But I don't know, that's just what I picked up from reading it.
I just feel like the prologue was also a very good way to cliffhang into the book. Because you're like, okay, so why is she on the run? Why she has to do this? How did we come to this conclusion to why she has to do this? Like, why she has to save the world?
Mm-hmm.
So it grabbed certain readers' attentions to like, okay, how did we come to this conclusion? I want to know what happened, and I feel like that's kind of why he went with that prologue.
And that makes complete sense. I just in my own like kind of reading style that I like, just like not a huge fan of the telling instead of showing. If I were to reread this book again, I would definitely like skip the prologue and just get into it.
And probably the epilogue as well.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the big themes in this book is the importance of like a family network and how everyone is relying on someone else. So we have Max, who is the leader of the group, you would say. So she is, I want to say, I wrote it down, but I don't know where it is. I want to say she's 15.
She's 14.
14. And then we have Fang, who is also 14.
14, just a few months younger
6
than
months.
She is.
Yep, 6 months younger than she is. And then we have Iggy.
I don't remember his age.
I want to say he's 13, maybe 12. I'm not sure. And then there's Nudge. And then there is the Gasman and Angel, which
Gasman's 8 and Angel is 6.
Yep, and Gasman and Angel are actually siblings. Like, they are blood related. And they all rely on Max at the most. And even though Max really tries to stay strong and emotionally available, and she's like trying to be a leader and always thinking of the next step, it's really interesting to see through her mind how she's the exact opposite. Like, she's physically strong, but she's not mentally strong, and she's not emotionally strong. Like, a lot of stuff, especially when Angel gets taken, which is at the beginning of the book, and that kind of drives the whole plot, is Angel getting taken from her, and she literally flies off and is like crying in a tree. And I think a very compelling way to tell her story, because I feel like from the other character's point of view, it would have been fine if she would have cried in front of them, but she was thinking of them and how she has to stay strong for them.
She didn't want to look like a total meltdown in front of them.
Yeah, because that would just raise their, their own tension and their own stress. So I really like the family network that Patterson made within in this story, but I'm really excited for the future because I think it'll be really cool if we watch them kind of grow apart, because they are very, very reliant on Max in the beginning of this story because they're so young. But I think it'll be cool, and later on, especially like maybe towards the end, we see them kind of grow apart and separate. Like, they each go off on their own way, and then we kind of see that, and then you can kind of show how they need to be together. I think it might even connect where, their fate is together too, and maybe to save the world they have to be together, and maybe they'll split apart or something. But yeah, I just think Patterson did a really good job with showing that family network and the reliant on them.
I actually agree with that. You pretty much put it in a nutshell. as far as the disconnecting from one another, there is, I don't remember the chapter specifically. It's where she started having doubts with Angel, who's the 6-year-old, because she has the ability of telepathy, where she can, come into another person's mind and read it.
Mm-hmm.
And a new power head came into her where she can influence minds.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of troubled Max a bit, because, what if she gets influenced by, the white coats or the researchers, and that grabs a hold of the entire flock itself.
Yeah,
So,
especially because she's so young and very impressionable. So I see where you're coming from.
And I believe like Jeb is going to play a big part in that, if that's what we're going to be coming to.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly the other person I can see is Fing, because I notice as I'm reading more into the book, he seems more in tune with his surroundings than he is with the flock a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, when they were on their way to California, they were hanging with the Hawks.
Mm-hmm.
He was very in tune with the Hawks and their relationships, and I just feel like he might distance himself away from the flock if that's the case. But I mean, there's so many possibilities as to how it can run down. I'm kind of excited about reading the next book on that.
For sure, yeah. To branch off like the power thing that you were talking about, so basically each of the kids have, they are that 2% bird, so they do have like a realistic wingspan, like in their backs, like they have actual wings, but they also each have their own kind of power. Like Angel can read minds, Iggy is like really, really, really smart. Nudge eventually gets powers to like touch something and see its past. So I applaud Patterson for thinking of this. That is such a good way to, if you're ever stuck in something, just give them a power, because they just show up whenever they want. Like they just
in a dire situation almost.
They can come at any time. Like, oh, and Angel can also breathe underwater.
Mm-hmm.
It's another one. So I think she's gonna get really cool. She's gonna have a bunch of different powers because she's so young and they come at whenever they want. So it just comes when it's convenient almost. And I think that's it's a smart way to tell a story.
I like how at the end too, when they found out that she can breathe underwater, everyone tried it just to see if they had that power.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And even Gasman, he was like, I'm blood related. I should be able to have this power. And then he like ends up like almost drowning, and we're like, dude, get out of the water.
I think he's got a knack for pyromancing. Like,
yeah, like he's really good with like making bombs and stuff. Yeah. What was Fangs? He didn't have one yet, did he?
I mean,
I can't remember off the top
other
of my head.
than the fact that he was fairly strong for him being in the
14,
group.
Yeah.
I feel like he might also have a possible power with animals, because if you recall, there was a situation with him, and I believe it was Gasman, that came to the rescue at the school with the flock of birds or the flock of hawks. So I feel like he might have an ability to
like communicate
with his fellow birdsmen.
Yeah. So I want to go back to when we were talking about how they kind of split up, and like Nudge and Fang were with the birds and in the valley, like because Max. So this is the whole thing I did not like about the story. The whole sub-story of Max going to save this little girl. So let me first give a little background. So Angel gets sent to California. Max, Fane, and Nudge go after her while the Gasman and Iggy, who is blind, by the way, Iggy can't see, they were trying to give him, like, laser vision, literally lasers coming out of his eyes.
Totally failed.
Yeah, and they failed, and now he's blind. So Gasman and Iggy stayed at the house while the 3 others flew to California. And on the way there, Max is like, I have one thing I need to do. I need to get Angel. I can't get sidetracked by anything else. Like, they barely stopped to eat. They're like, we have to go straight through. And then they randomly flew over, what was it, Arizona? Or something like that.
I think
it was Arizona. And she just happens to see this girl that was in trouble. And she's like, I have to stop this. So she lands. She's like, tell the others to go. I'm going to land and save this girl. And so she helps this girl that's getting like bullied. And then the kids that were bullying her like run after Max and shoots Max in the wing. And then Max is like trying to like figure out what she's going to do. Like, and then she finds the girl that saved her. Her name's Ella. Ella's like, come inside, we'll get you dry and give you something to eat. And it turns out her mom's a vet, of course. And it's a whole subcategory of the story. And I personally, I'm like, I think her name's Dr. Martinez. Either Dr. Martinez has to come back as a very significant role.
Which I think is going to be the case.
Has to be the case. Because, like, what's the point of having this whole random subcategory other than, like, I think the only thing I can think of is where it's trying to make Max want a mother and want a family. And it gives her that sense of Ella and Martinez are always going to be in Arizona. And in the end, she could be completely alone and she can always go back to them.
I think it also could be that she sees that and she's kind of envious of it. She's jealous of the fact that there's that mother and daughter relationship. And it could be, aside from the fact that she found out that she has a chip through the X-ray at the veterinarian, it could be a key factor that they may not end up with any place to go that's going to be a safe haven until they come back to Arizona with her. I feel like it's also going to be a key link to the chip that they found in Angel or Max's shoulder, because she could be the only one with that chip, or all 6 of them could have that chip in them. So, only time will tell on that one.
Yeah, I just thought it was very weird, I guess. I feel like it felt very unnatural, even though we haven't known Max that long. It was literally a few chapters in.
It was like a side quest.
Yeah, it is like a side quest. It felt very out of character almost, because to her, at the beginning at least, it was like she just wanted to get to Angel because the flock was the only thing that mattered to her. But on the other side of that sword, it's like this opens a big part of her, and it opens that she also wants a family. She wants a normal family. Is a big emphasis on a normal family. She doesn't want to be part of this whole thing with the school. She just wants to be normal.
I think it's more of the acceptance by normal people, because when they were being raised by Jeb, he wanted to make sure that they didn't trust anybody, because they would look at him differently, like freaks of nature, mutants, whatever. And when she found out that there's people like Ella and her mother, I mean, granted, her mother did kind of pretend like she was not freaked out by the wings at all, but or having that ability to find people who accept them for as they are. And I think that's where it's more of the lesson, aside from wanting to have parents, wanting to have a sibling. I think it's more of that yearning for having someone to accept them for what they are.
Yeah, for sure. And that's like a huge thing in this story, is like they like accepting yourself. And even though they didn't really have any kind of say of what's happened to them, it's a lot of accepting that this is their future and this is their fate, and they don't have, and especially because a lot of it is they don't know how long they're going to be alive for. They don't know. They call it their expiration date. They don't know how long they get to live for. So a lot of it is like they don't want to spend a lot of time trying to like not accept who they are, because they don't know how long they have to live, which I think is a very interesting thing. Like, I think I'd be really cool if that she gets to the end of the story. Maybe not cool, but if she gets to the end of the story and she's like 2 seconds from saving the world, and then her expiration date hits, and then it's like, oh, never mind.
It could be completely throwing something stupid out there, but it could be like the elves from Rivendell, where they live for thousands of years. Not saying that that's the case for the flock here, but I mean, yeah, it's an interesting possibility to put out there.
It would be really cool if they ended up being like almost immortal. Like they're always worried, and every year it gets longer and longer, and they're like, okay, it has to be this year, and then they just keep growing. Like they just keep getting older. That would be really cool, actually, for sure.
I'm curious as to what their project numbers are, because I don't know, when you read in the beginning, they called Angel, I believe it was Project 11.
I think so, yeah.
So it's very fascinating that they call her, a certain type of project, and the fact that she was a very prized, quote-unquote, specimen. And I feel like looking at that and also looking at when she saw the other specimens and how they quote unquote expired, it kind of puts into that perspective that, they came out to be kind of perfect beings, really, in a sense of, the Avon genes being put into them when they were just infants.
Yeah.
So it's a very fascinating subject to see just exactly how long they're gonna survive.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing with this book. So this is a young adult novel, and I've seen these books in like middle school areas, and this book is very heavily, I wouldn't even say implied, like it's there, like it's clearly there on like human experiments, and some of the spots get really gory. Like there was a part in the beginning where Angel is stuck in the dog crate at the school when she gets kidnapped, and she looks over and there's just this kid, like a child, that is literally like organs on the outside and extra feet in random places. Like they're very graphic.
Extra toes.
Yeah, anything like that. Like it's very, I don't know, it was very interesting to put in a book. And
noise person.
Yeah, exactly. When she was reading its thoughts, it didn't know words except for like short phrases. So, and props for Patterson to do that. Like I know a lot of people would frown upon that because it is something that society doesn't talk about, experimenting on humans, because it's a very inhumane thing to do. But to have a story where it kind of shows you the impact of doing that is also kind of good, because it's like, well, this is what's going to happen if you were to do human experimenting. So
genetic mutations.
Exactly.
It kind of reminds me of like throwing some minor things out there. I don't know if you ever watched the anime series Full Metal Alchemist or not, but the little girl and the dog.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's so sad.
I feel like that's kind of the situation, because that's kind of how it kind of tore my heart into it.
Mm-hmm.
Was it kind of gave that flashback of
that scene, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, so and you get behind on like Max's role to like stop the school, because you're like, I don't want to see any of that to happen again to anybody else, and it kind of gets you on Max's side. And that kind of like brings me to like, so the Erasers' role in the story. So the Erasers are these quote unquote models that transform into these wolf hybrid things, and they're very aggressive things. Like they have one track on their mind, and that is to find their target and kill them. And one thing, do they teleport? Because I feel like they'll be like flying away from them, and then 2 seconds later they're like, oh man, they're already on our tail again.
You remember the little thing I said about the chip that's in Max's shoulder?
Right. Yeah, they can obviously track them.
That's what I'm saying. I believe that's a huge part of that.
Definitely.
They know exactly where they're going.
Exactly. But how do they get there so fast? Do they run as fast as they can fly?
I mean, some of them are modified to be very fast runners.
That's true.
And on top of that, they also, you've seen some of them, they drive.
Mm-hmm.
But you never know. I mean, it might just be also part of that voice at closer when we get to like middle of the book towards the end, because this is how the voice is inside of her head.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's gonna be revealed to us in the second book as well, leading to how the Erasers getting to where they are. Yeah. I feel like the Erasers know that, because the whole purpose of them running away is a game, and mm-hmm. that's what this voice is expressing in her mind. Is what she's doing is literally a game, and so I feel like this is a game, just making her go to these certain places in a sense, thinking that they're safe, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we kind of see Erasers just out there.
Yeah. I like to think that if the Erasers are chasing them, they are physically running. I like to think that they're like the model form. So it's like Edward Cullen just running after them. Like, I just think that would be really funny.
Have you seen a picture of these, of them? Like
the Erasers?
Yeah.
Yeah, they almost look like that Pokemon. I can't remember what his name is, from like,
you have to tell me what generation, because I couldn't tell you.
I don't remember what Pokemon it is, but it reminds me of the Pokemon. But
Mightyena, perhaps?
I don't remember.
know. But I mean, the models themselves. I mean,
the models themselves. They probably look good.
They look fairly attractive.
They're not Harry Styles good, I'm sure, but they're trying. Another thing that the erasers do is that they call them piggies, which I hate because they're not pigs, they are birds. But I guess it would have to kind of go in with like they think that the flock is a cattle and that they're kind of like, sheepdogs. Exactly, yeah. So they're kind of like sheepdogs. An example would be when Iggy and the gas man are stuck in the house after the other three leave. They kind of like herd them into the house and they're calling them, oh, piggy, piggy, come here, piggy, piggy. And
let me in, piggy, piggy.
Yeah, and then that kind of draws back to also the
Three Little Pigs almost.
Yeah, the Three Little Pigs nursery rhyme. Even though I hated the nickname, but that's okay. So who would you say is your favorite character?
That's a tough one. Because I like Fang because of who he is. He's very strong. He's very calm in situations, and he's like, let's say if something were to happen to Max, he would definitely be the next leader. Mm-hmm. And I like how he's in tune with his surroundings, like the bird situation in Arizona. I like how he knows what to do when he needs to do in sticky situations. Yeah. But Nudge, because I love Nudge, she's very talkative, to the point where at times where she can be pretty annoying, and she's kind of like all over the place, like a typical teenager would be, Yeah. And especially in their situation, she's annoying, but some of her questions kind of make sense. And then there's also closer to the end where you find that she can touch items and she can kind of trace back what's going on. And I feel like her character is just beginning as well. I mean, we found out that she already has one ability at the end of the book. I'm curious to see if she gets any more. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a difficult, specifically like who I would definitely want to be as my favorite character. Probably Fang, but I definitely love Nudge. Yeah. I would say he's my favorite because he's always been my favorite with this series. He's just very he's almost like an emo king, if you could say. But he's very cold to the flock, as in he doesn't show a lot of emotions and he doesn't try to get involved with them, but he's a very compassionate character. He's a shoulder to be cried on, and he's gonna have your back no matter what. He's very loyal, at least in this book. he is a pillar of strength for the most part. Yeah, for sure. He's definitely the backbone of the group. So I would say he's probably my favorite, but too early on to really pick somebody that is gonna stand out the most because they're all just beginning in this story. So Angel's a really adorable one. I mean, I would say she would probably be the favorite of most people because she's such an adorable little child. She's got telepathy. And now she's got the ability to breathe underwater. I mean, she's gonna be a pretty valuable character. Yes. Yeah, I just don't trust her. I get a bad vibe, especially with her whole bear situation. So they went to New York to try to find out about their parents, and they go to this toy store because the voice tells Max to, so they do. And when they get there, they get sidetracked by all the toys that are in there because they're children. They've never been to this place. They've never been to it. They don't even know what a toy store is. Exactly. So they're getting sidetracked by everything, and Angel picks up this bear that she later names Celeste, and she controls a stranger to buy the bear for her. And, Max says she's 6 years old. She should know that is wrong. She knows the difference between what is right and what is wrong. So it has this thought where it's like Angel knows that she's doing something that is not correct, yet she still does it because it's something that she wants. So I think she's going to get too powerful for her own good, so I don't trust her. I agree with that, but also because that was when we first found out that she has this ability to manipulate minds. Mm-hmm. And I don't think she necessarily knew it right off bat. Right. I feel like she really wanted to genuinely ask this stranger to buy this toy, but she was nervous, and so she, I would say, subconsciously got this person to buy her this toy. And then you don't really see how she uses it again, with the exception of when Ari had the stuffed animal. Yeah. Because that was the only other time we actually saw her use that ability in the book, was that. And I think she kind of learned that lesson at the beginning. She found out that she has this power, and she found out that, the way she used it was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say we haven't seen her use that power other than just the once with Ari.
Yeah. I think she's going to have a ton of character development. And because there's a lot of books in the series, I want to say between 8 and 10. And that actually throws us into our game. So I do have a little game for you.
Oh, no. I'm not ready.
Don't worry, it's not that hard. The game is, I'm going to give you a title of a book, but you have to tell me if this is part of the series or not. Let's just jump right into it. So the first book I have, you just say yes or no if this is part of the series or not. So the first one is Nevermore.
No.
That is part of the book series. It is, yep. The next one, The Things with Feathers.
I wouldn't think so.
Nope, that one is not. That is a random bird guide that I found on the internet. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Things you find on the internet.
Exactly. The Final Warning.
Yes.
Yep. The Banished Wolf.
No. That feels like it would be like a little child's story.
It was actually a random generated story title that I found. So, and I thought, hey, wolf, that could be misleading. Next, School's Out Forever.
Yes.
That is actually the next book in the series. Mm-hmm. And the last one, Of Fame and Fury.
No.
Nope. Which would be an amazing title.
It would be.
Of Fame and Fury. It's like of the Fast and Furious. It reminds me of.
What if it was an actual story and Arya was brought back?
Oh my gosh, oh my god, that'd be crazy. So another thing I want to talk about is, they are very young, but I would think that they would have enough knowledge to keep watch at night. That was one thing that kept bothering me, is that they would all go to sleep and no one would keep watch, except for maybe like one or two other times.
I was just gonna say Fang, because
Fang did, yeah, a couple of times. But a lot of times, like especially like an example was on the beach. They were all asleep. They all passed out. And I get if you're all tired, but I'm hoping that's one thing that they will change in the story, is that they will
I'm sure as they grow older, yes.
They'll learn from their mistakes, and then they would hopefully have somebody on watch. There's 6 of them. They could do like every 2 hours somebody switches or something. Or I don't know. That was really like every time they woke up there was erasers surrounding them, and I'm like, come on guys.
But I'm sure, as you notice, with Iggy being blind, his other senses are pretty heightened.
Right.
So,
exactly.
I mean, I'm sure they have a fairly early warning if he wakes up and be like, hey, listen, we gotta go. We got a jet.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, there was a couple times where, Max was like, Aang is our home security system. She kept calling him. And there was times when the erasers... Aang. I wish this was Avatar. Oh my gosh, this is a whole nother topic. I couldn't find one thing wrong with that. No, so Iggy, she called Iggy the home security system. And there was times where she would be like, Iggy, why didn't you let us know? And he's like, I don't know, I was sleeping. I wasn't paying attention. So...
I have enough duties in my life.
Right. But yeah, so what would you say is your favorite relationship in this story?
Well, originally it's definitely Iggy and Gasman.
Okay, yeah. I almost put them down. I like them.
Because at the beginning of the book, you notice, they have like this sarcastic feel. Like, Iggy's very sarcastic. Mm-hmm. And Gasman, he can be a snot-nosed brat at times, but he's very smart. And I'd hate to be an eraser and being on the receiving end of them when they pull tricks.
For sure.
I mean, if you remember the scenario where they had pretty much made one of the trucks go upside down on their back.
Oh, the Hummers, when they made the bombs for the Hummers? Yeah.
Well, that was an oil mat that they had used, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And then they made all sorts of traps. They made the bombs. They're definitely a really hardcore team. And then you have Iggy, who is, and you find out more closer to the end, but you kind of like realize he's a very mischievous person, but at the same time, he's got a really good knack to things and how they feel. Mm-hmm. And so you find out more about how he's a very good skill of lockpicking. And so I feel like they're a really good combination when it comes to scheming up things.
Yeah.
And then you find later towards close to the end at the beach where Fang and Max that relationship might turn into more of a bond between them two exclusively.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like when she had inherently kissed Fang, that's gonna unlock something totally different in the next book or two.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of excited to see how that works out.
That was the one thing I wanted to talk about was like the relationship between Max and Fang. I didn't love it. Like, I get it. You want to have a romantic interest for her because she is the main character, but I think this is one story that could have gone without one. I think it's just going to complicate things way too much, and it's also going to be a big driving point for the story. I feel like there's going to be a lot of things that are going to go wrong because of that relationship, but I think one, it's another double-edged sword. One, it could be good. It could make them stronger, but it's also going to be their downfall. I feel like, especially with them being so young, I feel like that's one thing. I don't know, maybe it's different in the other stories. Maybe they really grow and
We'll just have to see.
We'll just have to see, yeah. But from the first book, I feel like it was kind of like glossed over, and it's like, you know, it happened and then they moved on really quick. It was kind of like a spur in the moment because she thought Fang was going to die, because this is at the scene where, you know, an eraser is literally banging his face into the ground and he's having like...
It was the fight with Ari.
Ari, yeah. He was like on the verge of death. Maybe she was just overcome by, you know, emotions, but I don't know. I just personally think it probably could have gone without, and it would have been a good enough scene still.
I feel like with it being glossed over, it might not actually turn out to be anything.
No, it will be, because it's a young adult novel. So it's definitely gonna build, and they're gonna put a lot of stress on it, and that's just a good way to sell a story, is to have, you know, young love. It's like, an example would be like Hunger Games, where I feel like it didn't necessarily need to be there, but they did it so it would sell. But that's a whole nother topic. But my favorite relationship, I would have to say, is... Okay, so my first one would probably be Fang and those hawks, because, as we've already said, iconic. But my real answer would probably be Max and the voice in her head. I find that so interesting because, one, we never find out who it is. I have theories of who I think it is. I think it probably is going to be someone that she saved from the Institute. That's why it's either that or it's Jeb.
My money's on Jeb.
Yeah.
Or at least someone who's right above him.
Someone's controlling her for sure. It's a very interesting concept where it's not anything good. It's not a good relationship at all. This voice is like physically hurting her in the sense where every time that it enters her brain, she feels like she's dying. She's asking,
having like a stroke or a mental stroke.
She's literally asking for death. She's like, just kill me. Like, I can't deal with this pain. Like, I can't anymore. So it's definitely not a good relationship, but it's a very interesting one.
But the more that you notice the relationship building with her and the voice, the lesser amount of pain that she's getting from each encounter.
I think she's starting to like accept it. It's causing less pain for her, and that's like teaching a dog a trick. Like, you give it a treat, it's gonna start listening to you more. So if you cause less pain for Max, she's gonna listen to you more, type deal. So, but yeah, I can't wait to see more on that. I can't wait to see how that's going to expand. I can't wait to see who it is. I'm sure I know who it is, but I can't wait to see. But yeah, so is there anything... I know we talked about it a lot throughout the story, but is there anything that you would want to change that we haven't said yet? Any like missed opportunities that you would have done differently? Like my example, I would say make the children older. Maybe just like a couple years. I feel like they're a little too young. And I have a big like pet peeve of like having younger kids in a story that has a lot of impact in the story that is going to, you know, it feels very unrealistic to have like a 6-year-old say some of the stuff that she says. Like, I get that she's mature for her age, but I just think for me, like, I've seen 6-year-olds and half the time they don't know those big words that they have her say. So I'm just not a huge fan of having younger kids in the story. So...
Well, with them having they were brought up in a lab.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so most of the big words they've heard were in a lab.
Right.
And you also have Jeb, who gave them the basics, the basic reading and writing knowledge that they needed. And so, and I would also, put that towards their living arrangements,
Mm-hmm.
as well as their circumstances with getting chased by the erasers, trying to figure out, what their destiny is, what is their fate, who they are. And I feel like, yeah, that might be too much for kids, especially around Angel's age, but I think it's also a kind of like a step up onto reality, because
Mm-hmm.
there are certain circumstances where this could very well, if not has already happened to a 6-year-old. I mean, not with a genetic mutation, obviously, but
Right.
where they have to be more adult than a kid, especially at an age where they should be thinking of coloring on mom's walls, or stealing cereal bars out of the pantry.
Right.
And I feel like I agree with you, but I disagree with you on it.
Yeah. Like, it definitely draws back into where, like, Max just wants to have a normal life, and she shouldn't be thinking and, like, running like this, but yeah, that's just my own personal, like, I'm just not a huge fan of having, like, younger kids, because I find, maybe it's just harder to relate to, but, and, like, another thing I would say was, like, within the writing style, a lot of Patterson's scenes kind of fall through almost. They lose their intensity a lot. They'll be in like a big battle or like a big chase scene, the whole vibe switches, and then they're talking about something else that doesn't have to do with anything. So that was just one thing that I kind of noticed that I'm like, I don't know if I love that.
I agree with that as well, just because I found myself losing a lot of interest in certain scenes of it, and I'm like, this could have been drawn out a little bit more. I mean, not like Dragon Ball Z level, but it could have been dragged a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it just falls back on the chapter levels. Like we have only 2 to 6 pages for a chapter, and I feel like it kind of revolves around that. So they make certain scenes shorter than what they really need to be, and you're just, what the hell happened?
Right. Yeah, like, I get, like, if you didn't want to, like, draw it out and have the scenes be too long, but at the same time, you have to kind of deliver the expectations the reader have of finishing the scene where it's gonna actually lead to something instead of just canceling out, but...
Especially with the fight with Ari, I feel like those could have been more brought out.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would have loved to sit there and visualize Ari getting his ass handed to him.
Yeah.
I'll be blunt with that. And then another thing I noticed we didn't really speak about is I find it very interesting that the Eraser's lifespan is so shortened.
Yeah. Wait, didn't say that. Like, Ari was literally 7 when they...
6 or 7,
6 or 7 when they mutated him into an eraser.
And I feel like we should have more information as to how these experiments went, which obviously will probably come up further on down the road. But I don't know if he came up with other names of the characters or not, but I know when at the beginning we found out Nudge's real name, which was, I think it was Monique.
Yeah, Monique.
And we didn't really find out all the other people's names. I mean, I think we might have found out who Gasman was and who Angel was.
They never said his name, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't really... I think that's kind of a downside where we don't know who everyone's real name is aside from Nudge. And Max. I mean, for all we know, Max could be her legit real name.
Yeah, because she gave herself that last name, Maximum Ride. Yeah, that's another thing with this book is that has a lot of dealing with, like, identity and figuring out who they are and what their goal in life is, and like figuring out who their parents are. But yeah, I think it's interesting to see, and I think it's kind of smart because she's the one that's going to have the most drive to find out about herself, and that's going to really drive the story to figure it out. Like, she's going to go until she figures out who her parents are. So as of right now, we haven't read any of the other books. Well, I take that back. I read like half of the second one, and then I never finished it, but I don't remember anything that happened. And you said that you haven't read any of the other ones, so we're going to do a little segment where we try to guess what's going to happen in the future. So any kind of suggestions that might expand. I think obviously Ella and Dr. Martinez has to come back because it was just too significant in the first story where it took up a lot of time in the story. So, and it had a big impact on Max. Like, she talks about them a lot. So they have to come back in some way.
I believe we're going to find out more about who this voice is.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to find out more about the character builds of everyone, the build on each character. Mm-hmm. I feel like they're going to go and see their parents because most of them were like in the Virginia area, and I think one other state, Virginia and Georgia, I think.
I think so, yeah.
So I feel like they're going to make a road trip to go out and see their parents, and they're probably going to have the erasers on their tail the entire time. Because, the erasers are kind of a good importance of it.
Yeah. They have to have some sort of, something to kind of keep them going. Something to kind of drive the plot. And
the other wing girl that we met at the end of the book, I think she's going to have significance with the team as well. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're going to also find out more information about how the experimentation with the Avon genetics getting into them. Mm-hmm. I feel like we're going to learn more about how that worked out. And then there's also the dog.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even talk about the dog.
We didn't talk about the dog.
Oh, well. He kind of came at the very, very end, but basically it's this dog that Angel finds when they escape the Institute. And
it's the human eyes.
It's the human eyes. So I feel like there's definitely a human in there, and I have a feeling he's going to end up, like, talking or something, and really weird, and I'm going to hate it. Because I said in my other podcast, I don't like animals speaking. Like, any movie where the animal's mouth is moving and it's speaking, I hate it. But if it's, like, through the mind...
Wait, what about Shadow the Hedgehog?
You have my stand on that. I already said it. I hate it. To branch off what you said, yeah, I think the erasers are definitely going to stay in. I think they're going to get stronger. They have to do something to make it more of a challenge for them, especially with the characters. Yeah, and especially with the characters growing and getting new skills, then they have to make them. They're probably going to do something stupid like make them fly or something, where they have, like, no choice but to... They're going to give them, like, bionic wings.
I think they're going to have more of, like, a frog-type leg situation where they can
like jump high. There might be both. They do a lot of experimenting.
I think his books wouldn't be as successful if the erasers got wings. Unless they became, like, wyvern-like.
But, and another thing, I think the pack has to break up at some point, where they break up for a long time, and everyone goes their own way. Maybe after they meet, like, somebody meets their parents first, and some people have a negative experience with it, and some people don't, and then they break up somehow. There has to be some sort of, because of the family network being so strong, there has to be a conflict where they all break up and they make decisions by themselves, because there's not a lot of character development if they're not alone making decisions by themselves.
No more fist bumps at night.
Exactly. No more fist bumps at night. Is there anything else that you can think of that you want to talk about before we kind of head out?
Well, we've discussed the vast majority of it, so, I mean...
There's still so much that we didn't even scrape yet, like...
Ari getting his hair changed, his hair dyed.
Oh, yeah, he's got green hair now. Well, he's dead now, so it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, like...
I'm curious as to who Max's mom is, because I am firmly believing that Jeb is her father. So I'm very curious as to who the mother would be.
I hope it's not Dr. Martinez.
It's a possibility.
I feel like it's gonna be, but I really hope it does, because it doesn't make any sense. I don't know. I just don't. She now
has an importance in the book. I mean, as brief as it might have been in the first book, I think she's gonna have a more important role in the next upcoming events.
For sure, she could become her foster mom, that's fine. But her biologic mom, I just feel like it doesn't make any sense. Max herself is very, like, stern on, like, she's a test tube baby. Like, she doesn't have any parents that, physically had her. She thinks that she was just made in the lab. And honestly, I would prefer that story, I think. Unless it's some random woman that, has passed on. I just don't want it to be Dr. Martinez. That's all I'm saying.
What if her mom was the first experiment?
That would be really cool.
The first Avon experiment.
Yeah, that would be cool. I'm fine with that. Just don't. I don't care. It could be literally anyone. Don't let it be Dr. Martinez. I don't love that idea. So before we go, I like to do a little rating system here on the Book Stop, and ours is a little bit different than normal. So we kind of make up our own. I'll go first. So I think I would give this story 6 dumpster dinners out of 10.
Dumpster dinners?
Yeah, how they always ate out of trash all the time.
I got it. Yeah. Especially behind the IHOP.
Behind the IHOP had the good stuff, yeah.
Oh, yeah. 6 out of 10?
But yeah, 6 out of 10. I like the story. I think it has a lot of potential, and I'm excited to see where it goes, but...
It's kind of low, because I would definitely give it an 8 out of 10 fresh rats.
Fresh rats?
Fresh rats.
Alright, there you go. 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10 fresh rats.
Yeah. It's got, like I said, it's got potential and a lot of room to grow, and he has like 8 books to decide where he wants to go, so I really want to read the rest of them, and
I'm actually going to go on Google and get the other ones.
But yeah, thanks so much for joining the podcast.
Oh, it's definitely fun.
Thank you. You'll be back in July, I want to say. So keep an eye out for that podcast if you've enjoyed Cody on this one. But yeah, thanks again.
All right. Have a good one, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for turning the pages with us this week. If you've enjoyed this episode, show your support on social media. Don't forget to turn on your notifications to get a reminder of the next episode. Thanks again for listening to The Book Stop. Bye!